To everyone, welcome to the Unit 3 class. Today we are going to talk about the retail environment. If you remember, last class we talked about the retail, the concepts of retailing. Today we are looking into how the retail sector needs to be honed in terms of the environment. So what are we going to do? Today we are going to look at how retail stores work as social entities. And we also need to know that while it is a social entity, it has to have certain boundaries, certain frameworks within which it has to work in order to achieve its goal. We will also have a sneak peek into the ethical standards and the security issues which are important. We'll also look into the regulatory legal frameworks which are essential to keep the retail stores in bay. Furthermore, as we look towards the end, we look into the sustainability aspects of how retail sector has to grow into. If you look into the retail sector, it's like any other entity that it is surrounded by an environment. In marketing, we always talk about how the marketing environments create a congenial atmosphere for taking the marketing or any business forward. The same thing also holds good for retail sector. If you see the retail sectors, the broad environmental factors can be divided into the micro factors as well as the macro factors. Obviously, the micro factors are mostly the customers, the suppliers, the competitors, and the intermediaries, on which the retailers have some amount of control. I would not say complete control, but some amount of a control. But the macro environmental factors are extremely out of their purview. They are governed by certain external factors, which makes it mandatory for them to be followed. And as a result, the retailing business, in order to go ahead, have to sustain with these frameworks or have to put mandatory benchmarks to follow the legal, the economic, the technological, and the social aspects of the environment, which tremendously affects their future prospects as well as the profitability and their sustainability in the long run. So if you look at it from a strategic point of view, the study of macro factors is very, very critical, and then you scope it down to your micro environmental factors. Let's look at the retail store as an entity. Gone are those days where you would say that the retail store has evolved and the customers have, you know, interacted with these retail stores in a myriad ways, multiple manners. Let's go back to our quintessential Kirana store, which we have talked about. It's one of the things which we always see that it flourishes primarily because of the social environment, the social kind of interaction that it creates. Most of us do feel privileged to go to certain retail stores, a term which we associate as a retail patronage. Primarily because these Kirana stores, as we had discussed in the last class, have been proprietary. They have created a kind of a very affable or a environment, a platform where they can easily communicate with the retailers. And not only that, they also not only buy products, but they spend quite a bit of time in having some kind of a quality time, you may say, in those outlets. Over a period of time, because of their patronage, the retailers often pass on a lot of pleasantries to them, sometimes giving a discount, sometimes giving something a kind of a very a services which has been not been a part of their daily routine, but then definitely they take cognizance of the customers familiarity. So if you look into the catchment area where your customer, if you're a retail store and your catchment area is nearby, obviously you'll find the retailer definitely acknowledges the importance of this customer who are drawn from these catchment areas, and they provide very congenial atmosphere to do the transactions. Going forward, if you look into the uh, I'm sorry, there is a certain issues. So going forward, if you see that the behavior of the consumer also in these parameters assume significance in terms of how do they interact with these outlets. Like yesterday, we looked into the different retail formats, modern retail as well as the unorganized retail. In India, we have to do with both. Both are the organized as well as unorganized retail because their numbers are very, very high in terms of unorganized. But the modern retail or organized retail is slowly catching up in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities. So scoping into what kind of a customer behavior a customer behaves while taking shopping decisions or when they are moving into these stores is of critical importance. One cardinal difference that you find among the retail sectors, the retail shopping outlets in Asia versus the West. If you see the Western world, the kind of outlets that they have, there have kind of crowding. If you say crowding, I mean in terms of footfalls. People come and buy, but the numbers are not as high as in case of the shopping areas in Asia. In Asia, you will find that people always like to go to those places in huge numbers, and they have other interactions along with the retailers. They meet people out there. So it's a kind of a very, very, you can say chaotic, but then it needs to be handled. So many times, the crowded scenario needs to be owned by the retailers. You must have seen a huge customer flow within the store. So that becomes a critical part of the trend that you see in shopping centers. Another thing which you say that which is a very cultural part of any market is the kind of the nature of people have. It's found that in Asia mostly people like to form groups, social groups, whereas in the Western world it's more of an individualistic. So obviously the retail store have to take that into cognizance while they are curating their offerings to the customers. So traditional stores, if you see, mostly have a very informal and a very self-involving kind of a scenario for the customers to engage. Modern stores, you will find the same customer when they go to a modern retail outlet. Maybe they may be far more refined. They will be far more focused. They will be looking for variety because the reason to visit a modern retail store versus a kirana store or a traditional store are different. So it's very, very important to know that as a retail store, it has a as a social entity has significance in the way customers interact with them. That fact has to be understood by the retailers so that they can effectively work out measures to take the customers into their fold. Let's now move into that. Such a thing also looks into that the retail environment is only will only succeed if we look into the, as I was telling you, that it has to be within bounds. It cannot be allowed to go or astray. So retailers have been able to fix up certain kind of regulatory frameworks, which is again given by the government, right? The Department of DPIIT is, looks into the which is and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry looks into creating regulatory frameworks for the retailers, which includes how do you license it, how to give license to these people, how do you have the FDIs coming into their retail sector. We will also look into how the e-commerce sector has changed the retail scale and what kind of checks and balances have to be put into place. And we also look into how the consumer needs to be protected in lieu of all this. That's a sneak peek into the FDI in retail sector in India. You will find that the policy envisages 100% FDI in cash and carry transaction, which is almost like a B2B or wholesaling in retailing. If you look into that other parts where we are looking into multi-branded outlets, where retailers would be interested in coming in, there are certain guidelines which needs to be formulated. I will just go through few of them. Like if retailers were dealing with food products, right? They need not be branded. It can be branded, but then you need not be branded. You can package it and give it to them. And there is certain limit in terms of that the minimum FDI, if you want to invest, the amount which needs to be brought in by a foreign investor has to be something like a US $100 million. The third thing is that there should be at least 50% of that 100 million should be invested in the back end infrastructural work. Because please understand, most of, if you see retail sector in the modern retail, mostly in the organized retail, is a very capital intensive area. So the when you talk about these FDIs, most of the money should be utilized in creating that infrastructure, which is the back end, so that you can facilitate the retailing processes as for the benefit of the customers, right? So whether it's with respect to processing, whether it's with respect to distribution, with respect to improvement, we are looking into quality controls, we're looking into the logistics, right? The security part of it. Everything needs to look into, or warehousing, which we talked about warehousing, creating a category of merchandises which can be stored in those warehouses and controlling that. That becomes like of a critical as a back end activity to support the front end requirements of the customers. Because until unless these things are taken care of, you cannot provide the services, the value added services that consumers look forward to in an organized retail outlet, which may not be a criteria for a traditional retail outlet, right? Going forward, they also need to ensure that there is certain amount of economic development taking place. So most of your merchandise should be sourced out from the, if possible, through the MSMEs. Do you know there is a Atmanirbhar campaign which has been propounded by the government of India? So a lot of MSMEs are being encouraged to get into those products and services which they can provide to these retail, these organized retail. So somewhere down the line, the FDI guidelines ensure that at least 30% of their sourcing of their material, of their goods and services can be done from the vendors which are locally available to the MSME. We had talked about something called the private level brands. So maybe that also is an area which can also be plugged into this, that the retailer would be interested in connecting with these local vendors so that they can have a better control over the merchandise and can also increase their private levels. Going forward, we also look into setting up retail stores. Where can we do that? There is a certain guideline which is there that at least 10 lakh population should be there for any retail store to come up with. So if you're talking about large cities, there is no problem. So that you require multiple stores. There's a calculation which you should be doing that, looking into the catchment areas, the trading area networks. You need to have certain amount of space between two stores. But in this case, if you want to have start a store, at least in the catchment area or the area around it, at the store, you should have a radius of something like some 10 kilometers or so that you can effectively look into the performance of a retail sector, you can look into the profitability of the retail sector and then the sustenance of the retail sector going forward. Because ultimately the retailer also has to ensure that it is a business decision that they are taking and it should be credible enough for them to carry forward in the long run. Otherwise, they may be disinterested. That is why you find that players like retail chains like McDonald's, Pantaloons, they don't rush up, or Starbucks, they don't rush up with opening their. If you see in the wheel of retailing, we talked about growth, stabilization, and competing, where they would compete in different geographical locations. But then that is not going to drive the thing so easily. It has to manifest in terms of the kind of demand that is there, and the demand may be a latent demand which could come up at some point of time. So how you to encourage these people to come up creating information, promoting themselves, or people are attuned to this change in the what the modern retail is trying to offer. That also needs to be seen before just getting into opening up a store in any city. So if you look into the tier 2, tier 3 cities, and would be governed by this particular framework or in the FDI criteria. Looking into the e-commerce definitely has evolved, and there are certain significant advantages. If you've seen the e-commerce, the online performance, they have benefited, the retailers have benefited by reaching out to a larger audiences using the method of using the medium of internet. But at the same time, If you are giving some price discounts, you are doing it at certain, it is definitely benefiting them. But what about the host country or the place where they are talking about? What kind of accountability do they have? So that be nailed down. And also, we have also heard the kind of a cardinal discontent, if I may use the word, that the existing offline retailers do get affected by the e-commerce. So you need to offset that, because when you find that the online retailers are paying, you are able to purchase at a lower price, somewhere down the line, their businesses are also getting affected. So we need to look into, though we are looking at, from an e-commerce perspective, looking at a massive, huge amount of orders being collected for the retailers at the who are in the offline space. We need to also create some kind of guardrails for them so that their businesses are impacted to the minimum possible extent. The critical factor in which we look into in the e-commerce policy is definitely in terms of what kind of consumer protection rights that are being followed, what kind of information and rules are being implemented at the grassroots level. And secondly, the competition. For the competition also, we need to keep, obviously competition has to be kept at bay, but at the same time there has to be healthy competition so that you do not get into any kind of a situation where you can monopolize the situation. So all these are again issues which related to the government at the center or interstate government. So mostly in the schedule 7 of the constitution, this has been very clearly indicated that such issues need to be identified on the e-commerce format, and of course there are initiatives taken to ensure a uniform kind of a scenario where most of people will come together, the people and the online the players, and there will be some kind of a gateway which does not marginalize the earning capability of the offline stores. Um, Going forward, another key issue in e-commerce is the issue of data privacy. Customers, when they use the rampantly, when they use the online sources, they give away a lot of information. So, how is the retailer, creating avenues to see that the privacy of the customer is maintained? Though we say that it is one of the most difficult things, and many articles have been written about the uh, kind of data privilege that the customer needs to have in terms of sharing their personal data, and this can go to any extent. So they feel that it's an encroachment into the privacy of the person. So obviously there has to be certain guardrails which needs to be put in place. So data privacy and misuse of data, of that data, is of a critical importance. What kind of checks and balances that the retailer is emphasizing? Now that's getting enshrined by the in the various rules and laws by the government, where they are trying to promote, uh, a more responsive, if I may use the word, marketing in terms of keeping the customers' privacy into focus. Going forward, we also look into how these government also create ecologically sustainable kind of a scenario where both can coexist and can reap the benefits in future. If you see, there are a lot of talks about how to bring green retailing into the fold, getting into products which can be reused, you can recreate, or you can get into some kind of a recycling the things. So for keeping the future generation, so that they can utilize these products and again in certain formats. You must have seen how bamboo products are being used today for as ecological products, which is substituting plastics. So that's a great way of looking at how you can make your things more sustainable and eco-friendly. As I was telling you, that the government has created something called the ONDC, an open network of digital commerce, which envisages creating an open network between the buyers and the sellers, creating a platform and providing a gateway to bring in more transparency, to bring in so that all these avenues of the descent can be taken care of, and creating a very enabling ecosystem for the retailing sector to flourish in India. Next most important thing is when we look into the legal framework, because anything which needs to be put into place, we need to look into the legal aspects of business. The same thing also holds good for the retail sector. If you look into the retail sector's legal framework, obviously the first thing is the Consumer Protection Act, I think, which is of tremendous importance. We also need to look at how the competition is, being a responsible competitor or being a ethical competitor, because when you talk about, because competition is something which the big players would like to come and dominate, and perhaps that's why the FDI very clearly was allowed in only certain sectors and not in all sectors, to prevent some kind of a monopoly in the marketplace. So the Competition Commission of India, which is CCI, ensures that there is a healthy competition among the retail outlets. Even when you talk in terms of acquisitions, like Pantaloon being acquired, by your Future Group. Future Group was acquired by your Aditya Birla Group, right? And later on, when we see Future Group was taken over by Reliance Group. So the Competitive Commission of India, the Commission of Competitive India, did come into play in terms of getting permission for them to go for such acquisition. With otherwise, what happens? You could be getting into the monopolies situation, which is not something which allows the consumers to give a free consumers to have a free choice. So you will be mostly monopolistic situation would be forced to buy only those kind of products which are given by the dominant players. So that's something which needs to be done. So that is something which needs to be looked into. Apart from this, there are various other significant acts which comes into promulgation. For example, the Trademark Act, the Indian Contracts Act, the Sales of Goods Act, which deals with the procurement of your merchandise, which also looks into, if you look into the sales tax and the central excise duties, which looks into the uh, how the government is going to get the benefit out of these taxes which are being paid by the consumers, right? Uh, which also looks into the Contract Act. The Shops and Establishment Act also looks into how the shops have to be established, what kind of licenses are required, what kind of, where they are doing it, what kind of avenues are there to basically ensure better shop operations. Contract Act talks about how long can they procure goods from the vendors and things like that. So there is a certain checks and balances which are put into place. We also look into the Weights and Measurement Act, where we look into the what kind of certifications are given in terms of the products which are being sold to the consumers. GST, as you know, is a tax which has been levied on different kind of product categories. Which there's a sheet, a schedule which comes out that for different kind of products and services, the GST is something which they would claim from that, and it's one time that you pay, not across the states. If you look into this, they are all related to benefiting the consumer, ensuring most of the legal frameworks ensure the protection of the consumers, look into how the retailer is able to recover the cost that they are doing, how are they maintaining how they are adhering to the merchandise, the store operations, and how are they also taking care of their employees. That is also another very, very important area. Apart from this, there are few licenses which the retail sector has to have as part of the legal framework, which goes into your, like for example, I had talked about the shops and establishment licenses, trade licenses, cold storage if the need be. If you are having food products which needs refrigeration, obviously you would have to have cold storages in your warehouses. Contract labor is a very manpower is a very important part of your licenses, where you are sourcing out from. Are they, are they giving the minimum support, minimum wages which are actioned by the government of law, by government, the labor department, right? And we look into the signages. What kind of signages have to be put? Communication, internally communication, which is there to make your navigation within the store possible for that. In what kind of languages can it be? Of late, you must have seen how in Karnataka people are saying that no, it has to be in Kannada, it cannot be in any other language. Or in South, they would say no, only we will only have our local language. Then what happens to the consumer who is from outside? those who are staying there. So that those kind of issues are there, right? And then we talk about health and sanitary licenses, because health and sanitation is of critical importance. So those required to be maintained at those retail outlets, and which basically help in creating sundry facilities at the retail counter. We also require food licenses in some cases. In some cases, you will have to have eating house license, and you have essential commodities at which it talks about the storage control order. If you are dealing with pharmaceutical trades, you will have to deal with drugs and commodities. In some cases, you are not allowed to have liquor, so you need special license for to stock liquor. For example, in Bangalore, some of the department stores do have liquor, but for that, separate licenses have to be taken. So somewhere you also need to have fire and safety equipment in place. So it needs an audit that whether the fire department has given you an NOC for. You must have seen various mishaps which has happened in the past where the malls or the retail stores have burst into flames during very odd hours of the and during the peak shopping hours also, and especially during the summers, creating a lot of issues. I mean, if you've seen the buildings are there, many a times there are narrow alleys which does not allow people to come out so easily. So we have many such instances in the past where because of this faulty, the infrastructure, people's life has been at stake. So we need require license and NOCs at from the concerned departments to run. Yesterday we were talking about sanitary services, like how the groundwater has to be replenished, how your runaway water has to be taken, how your sanitary things have to be looked into. Those kind of sewages have to be dealt with. All these are a part of it. Apart from that, the electricity board and the kind of infrastructure that you require, the kind of ACs that you would require, how many ACs are there, what kind of ACs you have to provide for the given space. These are critical licenses which are important in the legal framework. Apart from that, we also have for the store employees, basically, you need, as I've told you before, that you need to follow standard protocols as made by the government of India, basically the Labor Department. There's a minimum wages act which needs to be given. When would the wages be given? Maternity benefit, child labor act, all these are critical for to ensure that your employees are well taken care of. Let me tell you that we in traditional formats, these things in traditional outlets, these are not followed to the toto, and it's very difficult to also control that. But then at the same time, government is trying to weigh in on them in terms of as far as the organized retails are concerned, where the investments are higher, they have to align to these, especially the employee friendly HR policies which they have to adopt. There has to be a fair treatment to the employees as well as the safety of the employees. So these are critical. You can, for example, even putting people into the shifts, working hours regulations. These are again very difficult to monitor in kirana stores. But in case of organized retail, yes, that can be done to a larger extent. So legal frameworks also come in as a handy in those. Apart from this, the other store operations require, as I've told you, the shop and establishment licenses, prevention of food adulteration. If you're dealing with food which needs to be properly, packaged and kept, and in the warehouses, if you are not following that, then you need to follow those guidelines. So they have to take those licenses. Industrial disputes have to be taken care of. The fire, if there is a disturbance between the employees and the retailer, obviously you have to take care of the disputes between employees and the workers at the grassroots level, and those who are maybe the non-executive cadres, the blue-collar workers and the white-collar workers. Consumer Protection Act looks into, obviously, as you know, for the benefit of the consumer, so that you are not given shoddy products, you are not given expiry products, those kind of things. Packaging has to be, ensure that you are giving it at the right price, the right quantity, at the right time, right? And many a times, if there are customers who falling sick, are you getting a bill? Are you what kind of grievance handling situation do you have to take care of the grievances or the complaints of your customers? Those act follow on literally follow on those areas. Essential Commodities Act, as you know, by the Ministry of Food and Processing, they ensure quality manufacturing, distribution of essential commodities like food. So there have to be there's a certain time lag which is required. Proper manufacturing practices. You have to ensure proper transportation, proper packaging, so that it ensures that these essential commodities are properly distributed, not only manufactured but also through distributed effectively to their consumption points. I was talking about in terms of standards of weights and measures that you need to do in terms of assuring the quality standards of your product. Given the origin of the product, for example, you have anything which is vegetarian needs to have a green dot within the square. If it is something which is non-vegetarian, which is a non-veg component, it has to have a brown circle within the square. So those kind of certifications are essential. Apart from that, you also have the barcode systems to basically contain all the information that is required in terms of your packaging requirements, in terms of your the when it was manufactured, where it was manufactured, and what. So all those kind of information. Certain products like your gold and jewelry, you will find that certain certifications like BIS certification becomes essential. Of course, they're voluntary, but then it of course tells you the purity of your gold. So these are some standards which we can take up for ensuring that the product are which you are offering to the customers are not adulterated. You're not cheating them. You are not taking them for a ride. So that becomes a very critical part of the legal frameworks which needs to be taken into account. Retail today has evolved, and it has evolved in a big way. When you talk about ethics in business, and especially with respect to retailing, we have to understand that when the customers come to the shop, the first interaction is that what kind of store interaction takes place. What kind of, is it a place that a consumer would feel coming back again and again? If you're dealing with products which are almost like staples, grocery items, apparels, where do you expect the person to come back again and again? A lot depends upon what kind of ethical standards are being maintained at those retail stores. In the case of Kirana stores, we have seen instances of both. You find that instances of retail stores flourishing because of adhering to certain ethics and value system that they have created. But having said that, we also need to these rules and regulations which we have been talking about for the organized retail also needs to talk in terms of the ethics aspect of the uh, business. For example, pricing and promotional strategies. Pricing, we cannot overcharge people. We are must have seen that sometimes we go for a low price, right? Everyday low pricing. How does that happen? We have to be very honest in our pricing and we have to be very clear about it. But understand one thing, it is also true that these retailers today, as new avenues are opening up, the profit margins are shrinking. So they, in terms of their prioritizing, also needs to, in order to sustain that particular offering, they pricing plays an important role because that particular portion, which is the profit portion, goes into their operational costs, right? So obviously, they are not into retailing is not just making money, but also looking into other things. We understand that, but primarily it is a business which runs on a profit-oriented business. But today's time, if I do not value the customer or did I not give the services which is required for, then obviously we will be shunned out by the customers. And obviously, from ethical point of view, this is not right. So, what could be the possible areas that you could be looking into, or responsibilities that you could be looking into from the retailers? One, yes, definitely we should not be giving uh, services which we cannot promise, or some which promises which we cannot keep. I would say that. So whatever you are promising, please be truthful in that and be and dedicate and offer that to the customers. Customers do not like being taken for a ride. So whatever your value system tells you is that whatever you are promising, please keep that. In your promises, do not overpromise, do not underpromise also, because sometimes your capabilities have to be looked into that. So there is certain amount of transparency that is required for you. Secondly, you have to look into in from an organized retail point of view. It's very important that the data privacy issue, which I was highlighting earlier, because understand, for kirana stores, they perhaps know most of the people in the catchment areas, they know them, so obviously that familiarity is there, and perhaps people pass on that information also without thinking, without batting an eyelid. But when it comes to a modern retail or an organized retail outlet, where you're taking, you're paying by your credit cards or paying by UPA, you are giving your information, that information has to be protected. That needs a kind of a huge amount of commitment from the retailer side, because ultimately we have seen many people get into cyber crimes or utilizing that data for misusing that data to meet their ulterior motives. Right. Other things are which we look into is that please understand that for the retail outlet, the Janta Janardan that we call them, they are the general public. So they are the biggest stakeholders in that business. Right? So when it comes to situations like we have seen during COVID times or during when there is a cyclone or there's some kind of a natural calamity, retailers often we find that they get into black marketing, hoarding, trying to overprice something. These things again are unethical practices which needs to be done away with. But the point is, to what extent that can be brought into the organized retail structure, that is what is the most important thing. Maybe from a kirana store point of view, they can perhaps do it, but when it comes to an organized retailing, how do you do that? How do you see that such kind of things? Maybe as a policy, you have ethical standards, but when it is getting implemented at the when the customer is interfacing, are these standards being maintained? Are you really being considerate towards these particular aspects? Going forward, providing good services to the consumer. I think that is the right of every consumer today. Consumer rights ensures that they are entitled to see whatever they want. For example, if your product is not having packaging properly done, they have every right to ask this question. Many a times we find that that leads to altercation, or there is a there is not a proper communication which happens between the store employees and the, and many a times the employees may be going through some kind of a issue, like for example they had a bad day, right? So does that mean that you pass on that particular irritation then? So every customer has to be treated with dignity, with the humility, as well as at the same time catering to their requirements. Now, this is where the people part of the employees come into play. To what extent a retailer is able to infuse these kind of checks and balances among their employees, so that the customer feels happy. If you've seen the evolution of, let's say, a housewife going with a child to shop, is unable to make purchases because she has to attend to the child, has given rise to a small consideration on part of the retailers, saying that okay, fine, we will have a childcare area where there will be dedicated employees who can take care of these kids while the housewives or the parents are shopping. Thereby, what are you doing? You are not doing a great service by giving that. You are just ensuring that they're able to take care of their kids are taken care of while they are shopping. And many times you'll find that they end up they appreciate, the customers appreciate such kind of interventions, but at the same time it also holds good lot of security issues. So are they being monitored? Are you having electronic surveillance systems? You have to invest in that. And people who are manning these kids are these children, are they well, are they trained enough to take care of the kids? Because kids can be very, very difficult to handle. And mostly when there's an unfamiliarity, the problems escalates. So how do you attend? And that is something which is not cannot be. It's not doctrine. It is something which is very humanistic and at the same time pertaining to individual capabilities, if I may use the word, to take this giving the service to the customer. So you have many instances of very good services where people have been very happy, which we call as a customer's delight, that they've been very much delighted by the services which are rendered by the people. On the other hand, you have had issues where there could be altercations, there could be bad mouthing, there could be a lot of issues which need not happen. Then there would be intervention from the management to take care of it. But then even if such kind of altercations are happening, how you are handling, how is your customer care is being handled is of critical importance in satisfying the customers. And these days, if you're in an online kind of a thing, when you have a product return, most of the obviously people would get enraged. So how you're dealing with this product returns, which is happening from time to time, there is a cost element attached to it. So many a retailer would like to feel irritated with that. So what do we do? We have to create checks and balances. Okay, fine. There has to be a one product return or a second product return. Now this has to be also being told to the customer that they cannot, though the customer is a king, the customer is the ultimate decider of what is right or wrong for as far as products are concerned. But at the same time, there is a limit to which you can. So it means somewhere down the line there has to be certain what I would say an effort from the retailer side to see that these ethical parameters are focused. Now, it is not just by telling that you get it; it has to be brought in into the behavioral aspects of the people, and that requires a mindset of servicing the people in the right manner. Going forward, we look into vendor management. When you look into your ethical, how we are dealing with your vendors, that is also very, very critical. Today, you could be dealing with multiple vendors for sourcing out same kind of products. So, are you having from a retailer perspective, are you having a standard protocol where you are dealing with every vendor in a proper manner, being transparent in their dealings? So that helps you to reach out to more vendors, increase your merchandise, give more choices to your customers by following ethical standards. So it also uh, converts back into the customer's confidence that okay, the customer feels happy that we were catering to such varied users. But by doing that, you have to look back at your supply chains. You have to look into your vendor system. You have to have an effective category management system, which needs to be put into place. Over there, standard procedures would definitely come in a big way to handle them. Going forward, the shareholders who look forward to this, those who have invested in these outlets, obviously look for returns, right? So they want steady returns. The steady returns will come from where? It will come from a very as just now I told you, that having a very robust team and effective procedures, standard procedures are being implemented. So we are talking about governance issues. So rules and regulations are fine, but how is that getting implemented? How is that getting audited from time to time? So that the standards of that particular store is appreciated by everybody in the ecosystem, right? So we need to be very sensitive towards the ethical standards which are being monitored. Currently, we are also looking at how to look into the ethical aspects of it in terms of products and services. There are products and services. I was just talking about how bamboo products have been able to substitute plastics. So there is an ecology angle in terms of ethical standards. Now we are moving to a more ecology oriented or eco-friendly products and services, which we are talking about. Are the retailers engaging in those kind of things? Another very classic thing you must have seen that the packaging bags which are given, can they be recycled? Are they giving? Earlier used to have plastics, now they have paper bags. So sometimes they encourage people to get their own bags for taking the products rather than giving every time a bag which can be there. They do offer it at a high. Some, of course, they ask you that would you like a bag, and they would charge you for that. So that also hinders many people that okay, let me come with a shopping bag maybe and take things. So that is basically building in some kind of a responsive, mindful consumption pyramid. We talk that as mindful consumption, saying that okay, we consume these products, but there is a way in which we can be mindful, be careful about the way we do it. Um, in some cases, the products, like for example, in case of beverages, you can bring back the bottles which are given for reusing in the marketplace. Uh, Timberland, which is a footwear company, you must have seen, they have been able to bring in reusable. They say they invite that, okay, the products which have already been used and you're not using anymore, can you bring them to us and can we recycle it? And they don't say we recycle it, but you give it to us. Then they recycle that, reprocess it, innovate, and give those products to the market again, which talks about a kind of a very responsive kind of a trend, which we call as the green retailing or green tailing, as we call them, as a practice, which is being observed by more and more companies. And this is finding some kind of attraction among the people also. People feel elated when you find that the retailers are responding to such kind of things. Another ethical standard is that during the time of when you have COVID-like situations, those kind of natural calamities, many CSR activities are also done by the retail outlets where they go out, they cater to communities, they give a lot of products and services to to the communities to help them come out of it. If you have seen that recent in LA, lot of the people, not only the people, also the companies started, the retailers started coming out and giving products to the disabled. The people were dislodged in the Los Angeles fires, which happened sometime some few months ago. You find that these people were completely. They lost their houses. They did not find place to stay. Whether plan, forget about food and all that. But the community, the retail community, also brought in together in huge numbers, trying to cater to these people at the time of need. So these are some of the ethical uh, standards which can be adopted by the retailers. Another thing, as I've already told you about, being sensitive to the customer data, because how a retailer is taking care of their customer data is prerogative in terms of detailing out how they would unfold it to the customers in terms of the products and services and the promises that they made to the consumers. Going forward, we look into the security concerns which are there in retailing. Mind you, of course, when we talk about security, it's of massive importance. And organized, when you're talking about malls, which are very big in our hypermarkets, these are huge outlets. Security is of critical importance. Shoplifting, for example, or you're talking about employees who pick up those products and they can go away, and then so those kind of things are there. There's a shrinkage of merchandise which could happen in the warehouses. So what is the how do you really ensure that? Of course, then we can ensure them, but then that is only tip of the iceberg. There are many things which needs to be done at that level. Just by providing a general insurance may not be sufficient. So one has to look into how you are designing the store operations and the layouts so that these kind of thefts are curtailed. Obviously, when you are recruiting people, you have to look into their past records. That is an important thing, but that's not going to reveal every time because shoplifting can happen by any by even the consumers who come and pick it up. So technology can be put into place, that your RFID technology which is there can help you to monitor that when a product is being picked up by somebody and is not being built, so they will be sending some sensor alarms. So there can be checks and balances in terms of product thefts which are happening. So that can come as a reprieve. I was talking about the electronic surveillance system, that you have installed CCTVs at very critical areas which are important for you, like until unless or you have very limited access to certain confidential areas of your warehouses, only few people are allowed. Taking stock of the situation on a daily basis, until and so making a very strong audit or surveillance along with the audit on a daily basis, maintaining the inventory levels on a daily basis, ensuring that what products have gone and what comes out. I think that's a part of the store operations, which obviously needs to be important in terms of implementing the security concerns, apart from the insurance parameters which are there. So when you talk in terms of staff retention, you've got to understand that the staff can also be energized to be more vigilant towards consumers who come under the shoplifting. Shoplifting is also considered to be an organized crime kind of a thing. So it comes under something called ORC, organized retail crime. So one has to understand that if such kind of things are happening, we have to be very. The staff can be very vigilant. So that's why you need to allocate staff adequately into your stores. If your stores is running into few floors, you have to ensure that the store management system ensures that there is availability of security, proper electronic surveillance, as well as manpower surveillance, which is required to curb any such kind of unethical situations which can come out. Apart from that, you can also make standard procedures, which is a part of framing very standard protocols, so that the operational aspect efficiency is maintained in terms of your store operation, whether it is with respect to your uh, procurements, maintenance at the warehouses, transportation, because there is a chance of things getting lost in these kind of things. So if you can have checks and balances right from the point of across the supply chain, one would be able to find out that there are standard operating procedures applied. So there are checks and balances, there are guardrails to enough to take care of that kind of eventuality. And I've already talked about audits. Audits have to be done effectively over a period of time, so that you can reach out, you can monitor, and you can plug the gaps as and when it happens. But what is the frequency in which you have that audits have to be done? It can be done on a daily basis. If you have an electronic, you have an a SaaS software protocol, SAP applications. It can be integrated into logistics. It can be integrated into sales, and you can have very effective monitoring mechanisms, which is a part of an audit program, which can be done, which can be monitored even with minimal interferences without affecting. The idea is to ensure that to keep your store operations well trimmed, we need to invest in these kind of things, and then especially in case of organized retail, it is of maximum importance. Now, when we look into all this, if you've seen what we have covered today, is talking. We have looked into how the legal framework, how the regulatory framework, how the customers interface, the execution part. These are the environmental factors which are very difficult, which are beyond the retail outlet. So they have to be followed. They come as an external source to be monitored and to be taken into account to work out your retailing journey. So for retailers to consider what should be executed, how should we operate, what kind of stores, what kind of target audiences, what kind of customer groups to be adhered to, That's where again you need to understand whether I'm going to put up a mall, whether I'm going to put up a standalone store, whether I'm putting up a retail chain. These things have to be kept. And when I'm doing that, I have to look into the legal framework. How I'm entering in the market? Am I going through an FDI? If it's there, it's the foreign partner. How much is the percentage that they are coming in? What kind of sourcing that they are going to do? What kind of checks and balances that they have? Right? Uh, that's the part of maybe the just entering. What about looking into various kind of licenses that would be required for you to regulate that retailing that the businesses, because it goes right from your how you handle your merchandise to your shops and establishment to your employees to your minimum wage commitments to protecting your customers, looking into your contracts with your vendors. It is a holistic aspect which needs to be looked into when you are talking about implementation in terms of the legal primary parameters. Coming on to the ethical parameters, that's another part of the game where we are talking in terms of today's market, where so much of deviations are happening and cyber crimes are at its peak. People do not trust so easily to any such kind of offerings from the people. It becomes critical that you have to put checks and balances so that you have to create an ecosystem which is a perfect fit with the environment so that the customers benefit, these people who are implementing, who are coming and establishing their shops, they also benefit, and also can keep this thing going on forever. So sustainability comes from being very responsible towards consumers, the way they are evolving, the way the behaviors are being tracked, how you monitor them, what kind of products you can showcase, what for that, what kind of capacity expansion that you need to do, what could be the legal framework that you need to take into account, what kind of licenses that you need to put into place, what kind of government regulations govern to ensure ethical standard practices and governance. Those become very, very critical going forward and sustaining the business in the long run. And when we're talking about sustenance, we are not looking at only the growth of retail to create these kind of opportunities. As you know, we have in the first class, I had mentioned that retailing is one area after agriculture, which is contributing almost 8 to 9% to the GDP. So when you have these retail footprints increasing, the organized retail footprints increasing, it creates tremendous opportunities in terms of involving the people around in that area, giving employment opportunities to large number of people, but running the business on a ethical standards and keeping the future requirements so that the future generations also can take benefit of it through a very sustained way. As a result, everybody benefits in the long. So it's a kind of a win-win situation for all going forward. But for that, mapping your environmental variables are critical, adhering to the guidelines and the guardrails that are put by the government and the law is of paramount importance, because that is what is going to create an ecosystem of trust, can create an ecosystem where you can grow, and an ecosystem where you can take your community or people whom you are serving going forward from a retailing perspective. So these are the benchmarks which you need to look at from the retail environment perspective and ensure that you are able to uh, reap benefits in future as well. With this, I would like to end today's session. Thank you all for your patience here.